So I'm really happy to be here with the director of Coded Bias, Shalini Kantayya. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for allowing us to have the film this year at the festival. I was really lucky to catch it at Human Rights Watch, one of our kind of sister festivals, and I knew like immediately, I was like, we have to figure out a way to bring Shalini in because you know, documentaries like Coded Bias are kind of what we want people and Asian American and Asian diaspora artists to feel comfortable doing. You don't have to just tell Asian American stories, and we never want to pigeonhole people there. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you for making the film. What initially got you interested in this topic?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having Coded Bias at your festival. It feels fantastic to present the film to the Asian American community in New York. I have grown up as a young filmmaker coming to your festival as a way of honoring the accomplishments of our communities, our very diverse communities throughout the diaspora. So I'm really grateful to present the work in this framework. Um, I got in this work really by accident. I don't know anything about algorithms. I'm not a data scientist. I don't do it as a hobby. I'm sort of a barstool scientist, is what I call myself. And I have done a lot of work about how disruptive technologies, exploring like if disruptive technologies make the world more fair or less fair for people. And I sort of came across the work of Joy Buolamwini and the author of Weapons of Math Destruction, Kathy O'Neill. And I sort of stumbled down the rabbit hole of the dark side of big tech and sort of kind of grew terrified about what is how little we know about the technologies that we're interacting every day and all the ways automated systems are gatekeepers of opportunity, deciding who gets health care, who gets, undue police scrutiny, and, has increasing sort of governance over our lives. And the thing that I found really terrifying is learning that these systems haven't been vetted by racial bias. They've been trained by a small, sort of elite group of white men in Silicon Valley from sort of elite backgrounds. And have increasing power over our lives and intersect increasingly with our civil rights. And so that sort of set me on this journey, and I sort of discover it quite with the audience in the making of the film.
Yeah, I mean, I think, what is really, really great about this film is that it is this perfect entry point to have these conversations, right? Especially now, like, we're all spending most of our days on our computer. And it's shocking how little we know and how little we have control over things that we see or things that we do sometimes.
Mhm.
How was it? You were saying that you kind of refer to yourself as a barstool scientist. How was it kind of understanding some of this stuff from, and then my understanding, it's math, which kind of is like very simplistic, but
Yeah.
how was that like for yourself as you were probably trying to script things out in your
Yes.
head, and then
I
how
think,
was it to translate to the audience?
yes. I mean, I think actually, since we're speaking to an Asian audience, I can I have a lot of scientist cousins, and I have a lot of guilt about being the only artist in the family. And so a lot of my projects have been really important because I feel like
Like a
I'd
little
be
closer.
really important if I was gonna be an artist.
Hmm.
Because I think I felt so much guilt over being an artist. But I also think that I just am like science and technology a lot.
Hmm.
And while I probably didn't like medicine as much as my parents wanted me to like medicine, I actually really like the technology part of it. And I have to say that I couldn't talk to people at parties for 2 years because people were like, "What are you doing? What are you working on?" And I'd be like, "I'm sort of working on this film, and it's about," and they'd be like, "What's it about?" I'd be like, "It's kind of about how robots are racist."
And then they just lose it.
It took me sort of the whole 2 years to try to explain, to sort of articulate and to take in all of that body of knowledge and to sit with such smart people. I mean, it was a real privilege. I mean, I think there's 7 PhDs in the film, some of the smartest people I've ever talked to. But also, I think what is so noteworthy about the protagonists in my film is that they're not just like techies and
Mhm.
amazing PhDs and data scientists and renowned mathematicians, but they also have an amazing amount of heart and empathy and humanness that they bring. And you come to realize that being an outsider, um, being positioned in someone else's blind spot can be a real asset when you're developing technologies that work on all of us and are deployed on all of us. And so I think the cast of my film have a really special gift to share with Silicon Valley, and I hope they'll heed their warning.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's always really interesting, like what of our own backgrounds growing up end up kind of helping or providing a foundation for these things. And having
Mhm.
smarter cousins and having smarter family members is definitely helpful. And, not to say that all Asian families have smart STEM kids, but hey, like, sometimes you have have resources to pull on. Um, what was the process for you in terms of translating some of these more difficult processes and systems for the audience? Because again, I do think the film is a great entry foundation of what this technology is.
Well, I had to understand them myself, and I think there was a process of like reading the book, doing the interview, boiling someone's trying to shrink down someone's PhD thesis, and you should read all of them because my film can't do their body of intellectual work justice. But basically, and then trying to create sound bites, and then really trying to think through visually. And I pull from science fiction a lot because a lot of our thinking about AI is informed by the imagination of American science fiction. And so you see Coded Bias throwing homage to Stanley Kubrick, certainly, to Steven Spielberg, to sort of science fiction creators that helped us imagine the future to help us understand the present of AI right now.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that the almost like humanization of kind of the AI voice of the algorithm that especially becomes more prevalent as we get deeper into the film was really interesting and I think definitely stokes some emotion because it is Hal, right? And Hal is definitely not a positive character. What was the choice there? Because the actual voiceover in those bits are not, wholly evil, right? It is just like them trying to explain themselves. How, yeah,
Exactly.
how was it to, or what was the choice there in terms of balancing what I think
Yes.
we assume is kind of evil with what it is, which is a tool, right? And
Yes. And I think I do try to show the changing of the voice of Tay,
mhm,
the chatbot that goes evil, and sort of how the voice transforms. And that voice was also very tricky because half of it is actually documentary voice. The when Tay is the most evil is
mm,
actually documentary transcript from the voice of this
right.
chatbot saying really racist, sexist, anti-Semitic things, because it was trained off of data. And at the same time, it then sort of morphs and becomes this benevolent, almost Siri like voice that we've become accustomed to. And I think the thing is, like, people always talk about, sometimes I'm on interviews and people ask me, like, are there good uses of technology? I'm like, of course, there are great uses of tech. I'm like a huge tech head. Like, I made this movie because I'm a techie.
Mhm.
Um, I'm just trying to warn that it isn't actually the technology often that is inherently good or bad.
Hmm.
I do think the economic model matters. So, shifting away from an economic model where companies who had an unfair head start and have collected, 15 years of our data, like Google and Facebook, and therefore can have no unparalleled, they're not going to have competition
Hmm.
just because they've had this massive head start in the industry. And that's why, as Amy Webb said, these 9 companies in the US and China are leading AI. It's because they're the ones who have had this head start in the world's data and are becoming these massive superpowers of AI. And so, for me, it's the economic model, and it is the fact that we don't have any laws that govern this stuff, and the fact that I believe in having an FDA doesn't mean I don't like food. Like, it
Right.
means that, or that I don't think they're good uses of food. Like, it means that I'm trying to advocate for a certain standard
Hmm.
of safety for everyone. And I think that's what, Joy's movement for algorithmic justice is about. What Kathy says when she says, we shouldn't have blind faith in big data. It is about pushing for a set of standards that say, we're going to show that this stuff isn't racially biased, that it doesn't accidentally discriminate against people and push back 50 years of civil rights advances, fair housing, fair hiring, access to universities. Everything we love, everything we care about is essentially now being outsourced to machines in this, like, as the front gatekeeper
Hmm.
of these opportunities. And we just desperately need some laws in place so that, we can ensure that we don't go the way of China,
Hmm.
and that we don't have an authoritarian like regime, whether it's our own state government or a corporation like Facebook or Google, having unfettered access to our personal information. And I think in making the film, I realized just how powerful that data is. Like, people think, oh, I have nothing to hide. And people say use the word privacy, but I really think the more accurate term is invasive surveillance. And, the kinds of things that these computers can predict about us can be really predatory if used in the wrong hands. And so, we need to empower ourselves with the science and the other understanding to question them. We can't say, oh my God, this is big magic in a black box, and I believe everything that Google serves me up. We have to start to question all of these systems and realize what Joy says is that, there is this coded gaze, there is this white male elitist gaze that pervades technology, much in the same way that we've started to have this conversation in Hollywood about there being a white male gaze, in film and television.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think everything that you just said is true. And how, I don't know, how frustrated or how did you feel the at the tech hearing that happened earlier this summer, where I think all of the founders kind of like touched and skirted away from really taking responsibility or accountability for a lot of the things that you're talking about, right? Racial inequality within how they hire, how they develop, how they code, and then also how a lot of this stuff is being implemented into communities.
I think this power is becoming so opaque that it's so, and their ad game about who they are, the white knight of big tech coming to save us, and the engine of our, the myth of them being the engine of our economic opportunity, is, makes it a power that's hard to question.
Mm.
Big tech money is all up in progressive politics. It is all up in the the lobby for the left as well, as everything. And so I think that it becomes harder to question. I am grateful to see that legislators are finally starting to question the fact that a lot of them pay no taxes
Hmm.
and don't benefit society in the way that they can, that they essentially operate in a wild, wild west where they have no rules, that they're allowed to collect and benefit economically from our data without any rights and privileges or economic benefit to us, in ways that can be predatory and have no regulation. And I think we need sort of an FCC of standards. We've seen how misinformation is harming our democracy. It's harming us from beating COVID-19, um, from healing this pandemic. Access to information is central, to a healthy democracy. And if these big tech companies can't operate by the same standards as the FCC, I mean, arguably, there are more laws that govern my conduct as an independent filmmaker that I can be sued for libel, as I'm sued as I get ready for broadcast, than govern Facebook in the context of an election. And that is our most sacred speech. That's our political speech that has to be true, fair, and accurate, or we can't do our duty as citizens. And we can't make informed choices if we can't have accurate scientific information. And um, we can't rely on these tech companies to self regulate.
Mm.
And so I hope that that hearing was the beginning, but we have to go a lot further. We have to push a lot further. And that is only going to become, and I'm hopeful because, IBM just said they would stop, um, they would basically get out of the facial recognition game, stop
Hmm.
researching it and deploying it and selling it. Microsoft said they would stop selling it to police, and Amazon, after those two other companies went, said they would press pause for a year. And I think that is a sign that people are making connection between Black Lives Matter and invasive surveillance technologies that have been proven to be racially biased. And we've also started making the connection of how dangerous this can be in the context of protest when you look at what's happening in Hong Kong and the creative ways that pro democracy, sort of um, protesters are using these really creative lasers and makeup to try to diffuse facial recognition because it's being used as a tool, of the authoritarian state. And so, I do not. This technology is powerful. It has deep ripples in every sector of our society for all of the things that we hold dear, all the rights and privileges that we enjoy as citizens of a democracy. And it's really my hope that, people share coded bias, that you have these kinds of conversations at the dinner table with your family and with your colleagues at work, and that we start to understand these systems and hold, big power accountable.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's really great about this film is I think it really could have quickly been just like a anxiety ridden, just like doom fest, right? Which is like there's nothing you can do and all these kind of things. And the film doesn't do that, right? And I think it's really important that it doesn't do that. Your protagonist, whether it's Joy or the residents of that complex and that building in New York, right? They felt empowered, right? They found avenues to fight back, right? Same way that these protesters are. What was it like to find those stories, and what was the process to make sure that you can pull out some of that positivity and give people a handhold so that they can take that first step to have the conversation or to ask some questions?
Well, I can tell you that I didn't know that they were going to win. but I bet on characters. So
Right.
I knew Joy had something special about her. I knew Brooklyn residents had something special about them. I knew Silky had something special about her, in the sense that I feel like I make documentaries because they shine a light on ordinary people, and they remind me that a few people just like you and me can make a difference in the world. And like you said, that's the difference that these incredible people are making. The fact that some Brooklyn residents who didn't even know what biometric data meant when they started this journey, who just saw that their landlord was trying to impose this invasive surveillance where they were living, organized themselves, educated themselves, got legal counsel, educated their neighbors about what this technology does, and actually helped to fight for the first legislation that would protect against this kind of invasive surveillance in our residential complexes. Because if it happens in a housing complex in Brooklyn, it's going to happen in the rest of New York later.
Mm-hmm.
And so they help spearhead that for us. Joy Buolamwini, Timnit Gebru, Deborah Raji, these brave women scientists, all Black women, I should mention, um, saw a whole, the integrity of their research, something that I can't have. These women had so much integrity in their scientific method, the fact that their results are replicatable. That's the thing about
Mm-hmm.
science. It's real whether we accept the results or not. It happens again and again, right?
Right.
So the fact that they had so much integrity in their research that they were willing to put their academic reputations on the line, to speak truth to power. Silky Carlo and two other women, I mean, no, Griff is not, two other young people, right? In an office, it's like three or four people Big Brother watch have been the moral compass of the Metropolitan Police, and basically the stronghold. These three people at Big Brother watch, they are keeping the rollback of real-time facial recognition by the Met Police. And so I think it's really important to understand that none of these people thought they could win
Mm-hmm.
when they started these fights. But they started because it was the right thing to do, and they had convictions in their beliefs. And that is the moment that we are all in right now. And I do have to go soon, but I have to say that this is an election year. I hope that we'll vote. This is a year of a census. I hope that our communities will stand up and be counted. This is not the time to be asleep at the wheel um, in a democracy. We all need to fight for what we believe in, and it's a time for us to all act from a deeper place in our moral compass and in our humanity. And I hope in the film in some way inspires people to do that with our technology.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for answering these questions of mine. And thank you so much again for letting us have the film. We're so, so excited for people to watch it and to really understand that, like, there's so much power that can be had both in storytelling and empowering the people around you. So thank you so much. Thank you for your time. I'm
Thanks for
so
being a force in the Asian American community.
Yeah,
Yes, I
for sure.
celebrate you. I'm toasting you all. I'm sorry I can't be there in the theater, but
No.
thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so
Yeah.
much. All
Bye bye.
right, bye bye.